Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's having a good day. This is our virtual Moundville Native American Festival, and this is our last day. Last day. We've been here for a week now, and have had some great things going on. It's been a great week, and unfortunately, we have to do this on video on our computers and on screen, but at least we get to do it, and it's been great. I want to thank everybody again for visiting us and checking out the festival this week. I want to also tell you that you can make comments, you ask questions. You'll feel free to do that. And also, we have to do some sponsorship here, which we're going to tell you a little bit about. Moundville Telephone Company, Bank of Moundville, EBSCO, and Alabama Bicentennial Commission for their contributions to the festival. You are greatly appreciated. So this week, we've had, everything from artists to you name it here. And today we're going to another artist, musician, all around nice guy. He just does all kind of things, man. He's just multi-talented, and he's been coming here for years, and been hearing, not only hearing his music, but checking out the artwork. And we were talking a little bit about, my kids and his kids basically growing up here, So it's always good to see him, Mr. Charlie Mato-Toyela. And at this point, he's going to show you some things about the flute and play some flute music and answer some of your questions. So at this moment, Mr. Charlie, it's all yours.
All right. Thanks, Greyhawk. I appreciate that. I hope you guys are all doing well. I hope everybody is enjoying this virtual Mound Festival. I had spoken to some of the coordinators of it and talked to them about how I, really missed the outside part of being there at Moundville. And I really much look forward to doing that again here soon. But in this particular way, I get to sit here in my socks, and I don't have to have anything below right here, honestly. But I'm wearing socks, so and my pants, of course. But anyway, it's nice to be able to reach so many people with such a experience as this virtual venue. So I've actually been doing that kind of thing for a little while. We have classes and other things that we do. But today I'm here to talk to you about the Native American flute. And when we say the Native American flute, we mean a number of things. There's so many different types of Native American flutes and musical instruments, and instruments for that matter, that have been created and that have a significance in not only our culture as Native Americans, but also in the culture of the mound site, even for that matter. A lot of the mound sites, you'll find clay and pottery work that has been made and discovered over the years. And likewise, at some mound sites, some ancient sites, especially in Mexico, you'll find clay flutes and clay whistles and clay bird calls. One of my favorite ones to mention that I always talk about is a little bit smaller than this guy, but has kind of a high tone like that, is at the Cahokia Indian mounds. And it's a little bird whistle about so long, and it's made out of a bird bone, which they may have discovered some of those here at Moundville. I haven't been through the entire holdings to check it out, because they can only display so much. There's so much that have been discovered here at Moundville. But these type of little whistles were actually around at the time the Moundville site was created. Now, this one's made out of wood, not out of bone. And it's very similar to the old style that my granddad actually taught me how to make, which was made out of tree bark. So it's a wonderful little instrument. I don't know if you guys can hear just a little piece of it. So it's kind of a neat little instrument. And specifically, Cherokee people have been mentioned, I guess, in several historical records of having these worn around their necks and playing them whenever they meet new people or anything of that nature. But honestly, most indigenous peoples of the Americas had some type of flute or whistle. And even like out west, you'll find a lot of the four-hole flutes from back in the day. A lot of what they call the Papago flute players we're playing 4-hole flutes, but like the small one I showed you, this is just a bigger version of the same thing. So it's a great little instrument, beautiful little flute. And of course, I'm going to play something here for you in just a moment. I just like to get a little bit of demonstration out. We actually have, as you'll find in the comments and on our information, we have a YouTube channel where we teach people how to make and how to play the Native American flute. And when I say, once again, the Native American flute, I mean the wooden kinds, sometimes river cane, and sometimes out of PVC. But we make these flutes out of a number of different things. They're about so long, so big around, and usually they have a little thing tied up here on the top. But we make a number of kinds that don't require the ties and don't look exactly like this. I just like to put that disclaimer in there that not all native flutes looked alike. And then one thing I like to share with everyone is about this flute here in particular. This is a 6-hole Native American flute. And a lot of people, especially in the Native American flute community, which being that we're having this online festival today, it's easy to understand that there could be an online Native American flute community, and they actually get together on so many different levels. I've spoken to in the last week a couple of different Native American flute teachers who teach how to play the Native American flute like I do, that also have workshops and have hundreds of students, and they experience these kind of things on a regular basis, just like I do. I've been making Native American flutes for about 33 years now. You'll see one of my flutes in the little diorama there in the display in Moundville when you walk in the front doors. And the flute here, the 6-hole flute, is one that I always like to tell people to find out more information about if they can. I've got, like I said, some videos about it and some information on my website on Blue Bear Flutes about the 6-hole flute. But a lot of people believe that the old style of 6-hole flute requires a flute player to keep this finger covered all the time, this third hole down. And I always ask people, why would a race of people that have been stereotyped with not wasting a single piece of buffalo, why would they drill an extra hole and then rarely, if ever, use it? And there again, that comes from the experience of someone who's made hundreds of thousands of flutes, and someone who has read a book on how to make a flute may have made one or two. My experience with flutes has come from all of the great many flutes that I have encountered in the Americas, and I've had a lot of people ask me, why do your 6-hole flutes play differently? Well, I asked myself that question of why would we have drilled an extra hole and not ever use it? And finally, when I come up with no answer, I found the solution. The original flutes were a little different in size than the ones that people had been making. And because of that, it disturbed the location of this hole. So having said that, if you can see me play this flute, you'll notice that I don't keep my finger covering this hole right here like a lot of other flute players do. So you see, unlike what I always call the modern 6-hole flutes, you don't have to keep your finger covering that hole to make it sound like it's in tune. And a lot of modern flute players have countered this by saying, well, I don't keep my finger covering that hole. And when they play that note, it makes a whole different sound. It's kind of out of tune with the scale, and they'll play that note just to make a point of it. Or they'll play a song that's like a modern song that they'll play using that fingering, and they'll make a point of it. Of course, these instruments, I always like to tell people, they're so technologically advanced, you can play just about any kind of music on them. You can play modern music, you can play old music, you can play something that you make up and play yourself, or you can play along with a band. I've played along with a couple of bands like Greyhawks in the past. And you know, this old 4-hole design here is actually one of the oldest types of flutes that I have personally found. They existed even way before any of these came out. I guess timeline wise, this flute here, the 6-hole flute, has been around for about 3,000 years, give or take. And then my 5-hole flutes came about probably about the same amount of time, about 3,000 years ago. Now, this doesn't mean that they were in Moundville 3,000 years ago, or that they were in Chaco Canyon 3,000 years ago, but somewhere in the Americas, in the United States, that we call it today, there were 5- and 6-hole flutes at that time. Prior to that, going back about 8,000 years, we find more 4-hole flutes. And even at that level, the types of 4-hole flutes that people played were a type that you blew across the end of it, not into it, like I do today. So, you know, the times have changed, as they say, of course, as we are here virtually doing a Moundville festival. So, you know, we've changed. We found a better way to do things. And eventually somebody says, hey, what happens if I add an extra hole? So they drilled one more hole, and they found out that it played another note. And they're like, well, that's pretty cool. And comparison to the old one, you have to cover up all these holes and play again to play it faster. So they drilled an extra hole, and they can get that extra note without even having to blow fast, although you can still blow fast. So you can still play that top note there by blowing fast. And then eventually, as you would imagine, people would say, hey, what happens if we drill that extra hole and then we put one more? And then they try that. And but likewise, on all of the other flutes, you can still play that note. You can play it by a note combination. So like I said, a very amazing ancient piece of technology, this beautiful instrument that so many people today, we try to analyze it and put it into a box and make it one thing or the other. But in reality, its simplicity is what makes it the greatest thing in the world. So I will play for y'all for just a moment. Here recently on my YouTube channel, which we try to focus on different types of flutes and how to make flutes and how to make them out of materials that you have on hand. I've made flutes out of cardboard wrapping paper tubes at Christmas time. I've made flutes out of bamboo, of course, out of bamboo that you can get. And then you can also, you know, find videos on how to, I guess, make and play just about any kind of Native American flute, even clay flutes, which we start our videos on making clay flutes. Well, we continue them. I guess we started about a year ago before times have changed. But we have some videos coming up on how to make more clay flutes, which is great because we've explored a great deal of these other reed and cane and wooden types of flutes. So this guy here is a little one that we recently made a video with about small flutes, and it's something that that a lot of people, especially, you know, I have thousands of customers that I speak to regularly, and I guess 99% of them, the consensus is that the Native American flutes are supposed to be low toned. And so when I play my old flute, I have to reach a little far. Sorry about that for you. When I play my old flute, people really love that. They say, well, that's what a Native American flute's supposed to sound like. And it's funny that people say that, because honestly, there weren't really any that I'm aware of. And once again, that's coming from a lot of time and work in the field. There aren't any really low tone Native American flutes. The lowest one would have been about the 6-hole flute that I played for you a moment ago. But for the most part, people had small materials on hand, so they would always fashion small flutes, and they always played these small flutes. And a lot of people have the idea that maybe the smaller flutes are too high toned, and they're going to hurt your ears, or they're going to make you cringe, or they're going to make you whatever. And that's the thing, is we have a lot of ideas. As a human today, we have a lot of different concepts and ideas that we gain from others or from experiences that are maybe not necessarily firsthand. And they think that these small flutes aren't really capable of producing a beautiful sound. So it's actually got kind of a mellow sound to me. So I'm going to take a look and see if anybody's asked any questions down in our comments, because I've had some ideas that you guys might think would be interesting. But if you have some questions or comments, you're absolutely very welcome to ask them, and I will get right to them as soon as possible.
Hi, Mr. Charlie.
Hey there, how are you?
Good. So hi, everybody. It's me, Lindsay, Festival Director and Education Outreach Coordinator for Moundville. So we had a question. I think we've talked about it before. Someone wanted to know if they were starting out playing the flute, what would be a good beginner flute to start with?
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, myself, we make a flute that is really excellent for beginners, in my opinion. It has all the benefits of the old flutes, which, you know, a lot of the original flutes were made out of river cane, and river cane is a wonderful, wonderful material to make flutes out of, and it sounds really amazing. It has a lot of other amazing properties that I personally really appreciate, but there's one property that river cane has that is something that makes it kind of difficult. It has a tendency to crack or break, and for that reason, we started making like a river cane style flute out of this poplar, which has absolutely none of the tendency to crack or break. It's almost as hard, not quite, but almost as hard as river cane is, because river cane is a species of bamboo. You know, this really is one of my favorite flutes to play. I pick it up and take it everywhere with me, just like I do my little one, which is the same style, has an open mouthpiece. So the river cane flutes had an open mouthpiece right here, and that made them easy to play in a number of ways. A lot of people ask me, well, how do you fit your mouth over the whole mouthpiece? You don't fit your mouth over the whole mouthpiece. You actually push your lips against it, kind of like you're kissing the flute, I guess is what some people have described it as. But that gives you more control over the air going through there. Most importantly, it doesn't trigger the salivary response, which anytime you put something in your mouth, it actually triggers a salivary reaction. And that causes flutes to do something we call wetting out. Now, even a standard silver flute that you play in band will wet out to some degree, not a great degree unless you're on the marching field and you're sweating, but a little shadow of my past. But anyway, these flutes here will only wet out if they have moisture coming into them. So if you limit the amount of moisture going in, it makes them play better, and that's really a good thing. Flutes today come in different keys and frequencies and types of wood and this and that and so much. This is one of my simple traditions flutes, I call it. It's basically made to look and be similar to the river cane flutes, except for not made out of river cane. And this one here particularly is in the key of A, which is what a lot of flute instructors tell people to get to start with, so that they can all be in the same key when they're playing together. Myself, honestly, you know, a 5-hole flute, so that you don't have to be confused about whether you cover this hole or don't cover this hole. It plays all the same notes as the 6-hole flutes or the 4-hole flutes do. With that in mind, key of A, G, F sharp, anything like that. Honestly, we've got so many videos on how to choose the right flute for you. It's really kind of what you enjoy hearing. You know, a lot of people like this A. And the good reason to get an A is because a lot of modern music, whether it be country western or blues or gospel music or anything, a lot of modern music is either in the key of A or it's in the key of D. And well, minor keys, that is, because our flutes are also minor, which is very important to know. But it's either in the key of A or D. And that's probably because the violin or the fiddle, if you like to call it the fiddle, is in the key of A and D. So a lot of music kind of circles around, you know, the typical violin and you know, a lot of the I guess Gregorian chant style music that spawned everything that we hear today, especially in gospel music and in old school church music and what have you. Which eventually led, I think, personally, into the blues and into country music today. And then some of us even take it a step further with the blues. We take it and turn it into something called funk, which I think Greyhawk and I have played that kind of music together before, right?
Oh yeah.
So funk's some good stuff. It's basically the blues with rhythm, you know, where the blues is usually kind of slow and methodic and so many bars. Funk takes that just a little step further. And so even I listen to a lot of popular musicians today that play funk music, like Macklemore, Jamiroquai. You know, a lot of the people that are kind of groundbreaking leaders in their music style, they'll play music that I can play along on this flute, which is kind of cool. And you can go back to playing the original stuff as well. So when you go to pick a flute, really, it's best if you hear an example of all the ones that you know, you can play, and then kind of pick what sounds good to you. That's what I think. Unless you're playing like with Greyhawk's band, you might want to pick something in the key of F sharp or G, right?
That's it. I had a question for you.
Yeah, go for it.
I know a lot of people will come up to you that are not Native American and that want to learn how to play the flute. I've had a couple of people come up to me and ask me, he says, what other, I mean, are there any flutes in other cultures that are similar to the Native American flute in other parts of the world?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up. You know, it's kind of interesting that the further you go back in history, the more similar, I guess, things tend to become. As a matter of fact, you know, Greyhawk, you know that I speak a couple of different languages, not just maybe 1.5 native languages, or maybe it's 3.5. I forget. I don't remember, but a lot of European languages. I've been actually studying languages since I was a kid, and I've always found it interesting how the similarities of this language is to that language. And I find that with European languages because there's a lot of Latin and a lot of German in them. I'll find German and Spanish words and German words, you know, and I've been studying Norwegian here lately, and Portuguese. And Portuguese is probably one of the most clear Latin languages that I've studied, but their pronunciation is very, very different. It's actually, and forgive me for maybe I'm incorrect in assuming, but it sounds very African in pronunciation, which is kind of cool. Because you know, I've studied capoeira and learned about Brazilian Native American instruments and what have you, and spent some time doing that in my youth, especially. I've actually performed on stage in the last year playing a Brazilian berimbau, which is a stringed instrument, during a flute presentation that I was doing, and that was pretty cool. So anyway, the Brazilian culture has a lot of African culture in it and a lot of Native American culture in it. So you get to see these things all mixed up. But when you come to the language, you can kind of see where people were at with the language. And I thought in my life, I would never experience that with Native American culture outside of the Americas. You know, I always thought that it'd only be North America, some of the islands, and South America. We might have some similarities, but I never thought I would find that outside of the Americas. So I've been playing an instrument. I don't have one here in front of me, you know, but it's called a quena. It's a Peruvian flute that you blow across just like this. And likewise, there is a Japanese counterpart to it that is a shakuhachi. And the shakuhachi is a very similar, very interesting instrument. And a lot of them only have 4 holes, which is really cool, you know, because we talked about 4-hole flutes being similar to the old style of Native American flutes. And then, of course, there again, to me, everything either pertains to the flute or languages. And so I had started studying a little bit of my grandfather's Ojibwe heritage language, you know, because Ojibwe is kind of its own language group, Cree and Ojibwe. And in studying that, I found an article that was posted by a Japanese linguist talking about how the Japanese language, and Japan's so far away from the United States, how the Japanese languages were related to Cree or Ojibwe. And I thought, wait a minute, that does sound kind of right. Hold on just a minute, you know. And I was watching this movie with Tom Cruise called The Last Samurai, and one of my favorite Japanese actors, Ken Watanabe. And I thought, wait a minute, Ken Watanabe, hold on just a minute. Watanabe, that doesn't sound Japanese. That sounds like it's, you know, from out west somewhere here. And sure enough, a lot of the old language and old dialect is related. So chances are, I should say, chances are that when we were, I guess, maybe 10, 20,000 years ago as a culture exploring, we took a trip to the Polynesian Islands and to Hawaii, for example, and we stopped there for a minute. And I think probably we didn't stop in Hawaii for a long time. We probably kept going because the Hawaiian language, which I've studied a little bit as well, is very similar to the Sioux language. You know, my son, Greyhawk Makani.
Right.
Makani is actually a Hawaiian word for the wind. And in Sioux, people today say tate means the wind. That means the wind. That's just what we call it today.
Right.
And I guess in the last couple of maybe 2,000-3,000 years, a lot of words in Sioux have grown, I should say, not necessarily changed, but grow. Like the word for red, we say is luta today. We don't say sha like we used to. But then there's cultures of Sioux people, different kinds of Sioux speaking people, that say sha, like the Cheyenne say sha all the time, which means that's cool. But in South Dakota, when you say sha, it just means, oh, that's kind of interesting. You know, it's like your Sunday best, I guess is what people would say. It's fancy, you know, it's kind of one of those multi-use words. But like my son Makani is a Hawaiian word that means the wind, and my daughter Makasha actually is a Sioux name, and it means a beautiful little piece of the earth, you know, and a really fancy little piece of the earth is what that means. And you hear the similarity between the two of them. And, you know, these things are something that we obviously shared. And of course, since then, my daughter's 17 now, Makasha, she has found, I guess, about 2 or 3 other cultures of people that have the word Makasha in their language, and it's a name. And it's including Russian, which is interesting. So she's practiced Russian, I guess, for about 4 years before she stopped and went back into doing other things in school. But yeah, so it's interesting how we share these instruments and how so similar so many of them are to each other, even though we are cultures apart today.
Well, I know in New Orleans, you know, we have that great mix of people.
Oh,
that
absolutely.
come in. That's what makes New Orleans music so unique. But
That's right.
also, there's a lot of similarities, and that's how the African, the Native American, and different people from the islands and all have blended in to make New Orleans music, but
That's right. That's
you
right.
look at how close we really were and how easy it was for us to adopt each other's cultures that way.
Yeah, that's right. Here in the past 2 years, I've been contracted to make a type of special blues instrument. I don't know if you've heard of this before, Greyhawk, because it goes back way before my time, and I know you got a couple years on me, but it's way back there. We're talking. It was almost impossible to find an actual recording of this instrument, and it's a type of flute. People call it the quills. I don't know if you've
Yes,
seen.
yes.
That's an ancient in our day. It's 150-year-old, considered to be, I guess, African origin pan flute. And the quills are, in the old days, were a big part of blues music when blues was just coming alive, when it was being created, once again, by African and Native American people, just a sharing of culture there. When it was being created, the quills used to be a big part of the deal. So I've got a friend who is a professional blues musician up in Chicago who had ordered a set of quills from me. And so I made those, and he's played them on stage and stuff, which is really, to me, is a great honor. I love it when I hear people playing my flutes and they're doing so much with them that they enjoy. That makes me happy.
Some of the first quills I've heard of that came in our area came in from Haiti into New Orleans.
Yeah. No
Yeah.
doubt. No doubt. Good stuff too. And of course, there again, African and Native American intercooperation and mixing and everything has created some beautiful stuff, just like capoeira, the Brazilian martial art we were talking about.
Right.
So so a lot of great stuff there. And of course too, the Native American flute has its own place today, but there are people who are Native American flute players, let me tell you from my own experience, that play with heavy metal bands, that play with blues bands, as you know, play rock and roll music. And I am honored today to having met a Native American flute player that he's got some of my flutes now, that is a professional, I mean mainstream live event professional beatboxer that is playing the flute and beatboxing, which is way too cool. Which I don't know if you've seen it, Greyhawk, but I have a video of Makani and Makasha. Now, I've got to mention River, my third son, at some point in time, but Makani and Makasha, she was playing the flute and he was beatboxing at Mountville, right inside of the museum. We recorded a video of it, which was just super intense, intensely cool. So we got a lot of stuff like that. And then, today with so much going on, I've had the fortune of meeting a Mongolian heavy metal band, which is playing traditional Mongolian instruments called the Hu, not like WHO, but it's HU.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Got to meet them, got to listen to them in Orlando at the concert, and got to meet them in person in California and play the flute with them and stuff. They're on our Instagram. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, when you were talking about Mongolian music and you hear some of the stuff that they're doing now, they call it heavy metal Mongolian music.
Yeah.
And you listen to the rhythms and you listen to their music, and it sounds like it came from here. I mean, you can hear some of the Native American sounds in their music. It's unbelievable.
Well, likewise, a lot of people have this theory that I like to throw that word out there, that we came across the Bering Strait and what have you. And of course, we've went a lot of places at a lot of different times. And there are some really great Native American, speaking of Sioux writer, Vine Deloria, who wrote that we probably came from here and went elsewhere. We probably originally came from Central America, and it's not far off. If camels could have originated from our llamas in South America, there's no reason people couldn't have been here too.
Right.
So really good stuff. But anyway, the idea that we may have gone across the Bering Strait or shared with other cultures, or and my Choctaw friends, gosh, I don't want to call anybody out. I love all of y'all, but in a lot of old history books, possibly not right, but in a lot of old history books, they used to refer to the Choctaw as being a Southern Sioux Indian. And, you and I have talked about the Homa being a Southern Cherokee, so it's not uncommon for us to share our culture with other cultures and all around. You know, there never has been closed doors in the past, and even though there's closed doors today, it doesn't mean that we can't open them. So,
Well, I always
something to
say
think about.
until the people came from the other countries, we didn't have those boundaries that we see today. You know,
That's right.
like when we talk about states now and those state lines, it seems to keep us apart. But at one point, those lines were not there.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
Especially
right.
like Moundville, how Moundville spread out so far.
Absolutely.
uh, that, yeah, you had Choctaw, you had Chickasaw, you had Creek, you had all of them,
Hmm.
and they were all based in, off of what we see as Moundville, and
That's
there were
right.
no boundaries at that point.
And that's why, for example, all of our Cherokee stomp dance songs, the historical ones anyway, not the new ones, Cherokee stomp dance is all sung in Muskogee, you know,
Oh yeah.
because that's where we learned it from. We were the last group of people. I like to say, at least my opinion. I guess that's a good enough disclosure there. In my opinion, we were the last mound builders, you know, because they find some of our cultural significance at some of the sites, Cahokia and here at Moundville, and you know, a lot of the ancient sites, but it wasn't it wasn't like we were the first mound builders. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we always shared culture and what have you. But anyway,
Well, I was going to ask you, would you, if you had any last things to say to anybody that would be interested in learning the flute or learning about the flute?
oh, sure, absolutely. As a matter of fact, while we're sitting here, as you know, I'm actually broadcasting here on my phone. While we're sitting here, one of the four previously mentioned flute teachers actually came on and texted me, and I'm reading her little preview while we're talking, which is kind of cool. But myself, you know, I've been teaching how to play and how to make Native American flutes for a long, long time as well. And we have some very affordable classes coming up here on our website. This weekend, they're actually going to be offered. And then in about 2 weeks, they'll begin, where you can subscribe to how to play the flute. And people have asked me to do this for a long, long time. And I've always put out flute playing videos, which we have several that we're launching, I think, tonight and tomorrow. And we've got some more that we're recording on Sunday tomorrow. But we have flute playing classes, you know, so there's no loss of information out there. And these other flute instructors will teach from their perspective, which is great, because then you get not only my experience, but you get their experiences as well. One of the other flute instructors that I've spoken with here recently that is going to be doing a comparison contrast video of different flutes by different flute makers. I've known him for some years now, and he's always playing on the pro circuit for Native American flutes. If there really is such a thing, he's playing on the pro circuit, flute playing. I've recorded 9 albums of my own music, and you know, been featured on Native American rap albums. I've played, like I said, with country western music. I played in orchestra with my flutes about a year or so ago, you know, on stage in Atlanta. So there's no end to the available information. We have
Yeah.
available information. And like I said, it's honestly the simplest instrument in the world. If you can't master it by yourself, sitting in a room in 2 hours, really, I'd be surprised.
Well, I want to thank you. Again, if you want to get flutes and you want to get any information, you want to order anything from Charlie, it's bluebearflutes.com. And like I said, he makes some great flutes, and he could definitely get them to you if you want to start learning how to play. And Charlie, it was good seeing you.
You too, my
And
friend. Really, really is. And I
tell
miss
your
being at
family.
Moundville. I
Oh,
envy you right now.
yeah, definitely. We'd be hanging out right now here at Mountville.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
but tell your family hi and
I will.
miss them. And it's been interesting being here by myself.
Well, I promise you, man. I've been thinking about being there with you the whole time. So
Oh yeah.
you're not by yourself in thought. If anything, you know,
Oh
I've
no,
really.
no. I could feel everybody here. I want to share this before we head on out. We do have you can order from our gift shop here at the Festival Museum, and I'm going to show you the shirt we have. This is our shirt for this year for the festival. And if you've been collecting those shirts for a while, well, you can definitely catch up on getting your shirts. And we do have our mugs and things like that. But again, I want to thank everybody. Thank you again, Charlie, for being with us.
Hey, thank you guys for the opportunity.
Definitely. Like I said, good seeing you. And everybody, we still have a few more things left today. And today is our last day for the festival. And hopefully you enjoyed what we've had so far this week. And I hope you enjoy what we're going to have for the rest of the day. And again, Charlie, you have a great day. And everybody out there, you take it easy, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, my friend. Y'all take care.
Yoko Ki.